Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Priyam, and some of you may already know this, but I am the tutor for your economics class at City College. So I work through this organization called City Tutors, and this is my fourth semester supporting a class such as yours. I usually do macroeconomics, usually 101 and then 102 sometimes. So having said that, though, I already introduced myself in the email, so now I just really just want to get straight to the coursework. So right now I'm sharing my screen and I'm going to try to go to chapter 3, which all of the review sheets that I'll be making for this class for this semester will be for chapters will be for the chapters in your OpenStax textbook, which I believe you access online. So I went straight ahead and I jumped to chapter 3, and I made 3 review sheets for this week, chapters 3, 4, and 5. So having said that, though, chapter 3 is demand and supply. And each review sheet basically just kind of goes over the main important, the most important vocab terms for each chapter. And I break it down by section, as you can see here. Right here, I have chapter 3, demand and supply. 3.1 is supply, demand, and equilibrium, which I'm sure most of you know or are familiar with this graph already, but demand usually goes down and supply usually goes up, and they usually cross each other in the shape of an X. And wherever they intersect is a point of equilibrium where supply equals demand, where the market is kind of at a state of equilibrium where things that are demanded in the market are the need is being met by the suppliers. So shifts in demand and supply usually like not at this point, but later on in the semester, or if you go on to macroeconomics 102, or the intermediate level, whatever it's called at City College, you're usually going to see supply and demand curves making shifts to the left or to the right. So these lines will either go left or right, depending on what happens with different factors in the economy. And different factors, they all cause shifts in both supply and demand. So as of now, we kind of set aside all the other factors that might shift supply and demand. And right now, the only thing that we're really looking at is the actual two variables and the price of whether or not the price that affects supply and demand. Um, and there are a lot of external factors that could also affect these two variables, but for right now, all we just focus on is the price of things. So just I have really quickly here just like a few examples of what those external factors might be. But at this level, you really don't need to know, or you don't really need to be as familiar with them. So don't worry so much about it. Um, a normal good is a type of good that consumers demand more as their income rises, but as for an inferior good, um, that demand actually decreases as their income rises. So, for example, a normal type of good might be something like chocolate, because chocolate is generally something that most people want and desire, and as their income increases, they might go from something like they might go from something like Kit Kats to like Ferrero Rocher chocolates, which is like a normal good. But here I have like Ferrero Rocher chocolates, however you pronounce that. It's a normal good because typically those are really good, high quality chocolates, and people want more of them as their income rises. And then here I have Three Musketeers as like an inferior good because it's like not as good of a chocolate. So likewise, there are many factors that cause a shift in supply, such as a change in the factors of production, manufacturing costs, etc. 3.3 is changes in equilibrium price, and the textbook outlines like a 4-step process as to how you can analyze what affects equilibrium. So I recommend going over that just because it's like a really quick way to kind of verify whether or not something has actually impacted supply and demand, and why and how exactly it would affect it. And then lastly, there's price ceilings and price floors. Price controls are basically just legal limits as to how expensive a good might be. A ceiling is a limit, while a floor is a minimum. So the minimum wage is an example of a price floor, because the minimum wage in New York City right now, I believe, is $15 per hour, while rent controlled apartments are an example of a price ceiling. So that's it for chapter 3. Chapter 4 is labor and financial markets. So salaries and wages are just the price of labor for employers. Um, just want to include that space in there. Okay, so just like with any other good, labor follows the law of supply and demand. And as the price of labor gets higher, the quantity demanded by employers goes down, while quantity supplied by workers goes up, because everyone wants to make more money. So typically employers will increase wages if they experience a labor shortage. Okay, so this whole section is basically just talking about how labor in itself is actually a good for employers that's supplied by workers. And that actually follows the supply of the law of supply and demand, just like every other good. So don't get tripped up over that. 4.2 is demand and supply in financial markets. Sorry, I'm like noticing all these typos. Demand and supply and financial markets. Demand and supply in financial markets. Financial capital encompasses different kinds of financial assets like savings, investments, checking accounts, credits, loans. The suppliers of savings are actually consumers who deposit their money. So this is basically just going into the modern banking system, which is that if I am someone who deposits money in a bank account, then I am someone who's basically giving supply to a financial institution like a bank or a credit union or whatever. And then they take that money and then they do different things with it, like they loan it out to other people, they loan it out to other businesses, and they make a profit off of my deposits. And that's basically just how the modern banking system works. Okay, and the next section is chapter 5, which I think is like the most complicated. It's called elasticity. But and there's all these like mathematical ways as to how you define elasticity, which I go over here in the blue highlighted section. But honestly, though, the way that I think of it is, if the price of a good drastically increases, then would you be as willing to purchase it? If the answer is no, then the good is elastic. So, for example, if you're gonna go out on a cruise in the Caribbean and you want to buy tickets for this summer, you buy tickets this year, but then next year you want to go on the same cruise, and you notice that the prices had actually tripled since last year. Would you be as willing to purchase those cruise tickets if the price has tripled, or would you kind of look at it and be like, no, it's okay, I'm not going to go this year? If the answer is yes, that you wouldn't be willing to buy the ticket, then the cruise or the tickets are elastic, because it's something that you kind of are sensitive to about the price fluctuations. Like if the price really fluctuates, then you might not be as willing to pay for the ticket. So then you're just like, okay, never mind, I just won't go anywhere this year. So basically, the way I define elasticity is how sensitive a consumer is to price fluctuations in the market. So if the consumer is really sensitive and they're not willing to pay, um, for the same good, if it's just a little bit more expensive, then that price is elastic. If the price changes, but then the consumer looks at that price change and they're like, you know what, I still need this product, so I'm going to go out of my way to buy it regardless of how much the price changes, then it's really not, then the good is inelastic, meaning that, the consumer is really not that sensitive to price changes. And there's a page, actually, page 116 in your textbook. It has a really good summary of elasticities for different types of goods. And they range from everything from housing, from basic things like housing and groceries, all the way up to like luxury goods. So generally speaking, luxury goods are pretty elastic, because if the price is super high, then it's not something that you really need in your life, so you're not gonna go out and buy it. But if it's something like groceries or your rent or your mortgage payment, then you'll kind of go out of your way to pay for it because you need housing or you need food at the end of the day. So that's basically just how I look at it. I do have a mathematical definition of it that you're more than welcome to go over. And I don't know, your professor might prefer the mathematical version of it. So definitely get that down. But yeah, other than that, that's basically it for this lesson. So these kinds of review sheets and review videos are going to be posted every week, and I typically should be sending this out every Sunday or Saturday, but it was a 3-day weekend, so I just gave myself a little break. So yeah, that's it for this lesson. Um, and I will have another few review sheets ready for you next week, and a video with it. Okay, so take care, guys. Bye.